The building had 5 independent security systems and a vault door that weighed several hundred kilograms, and the company that installed all of it had told every single client that what they were storing inside was completely untouchable. Diamond traders from across the world believed that. They stored their stones there, locked up their life's work behind that door, and went home without a second thought. So when investigators finally stood inside that vault room on a Sunday morning in February 2003 and began working out how the thieves had gotten in and neutralized every single one of those systems, they expected to find evidence of sophisticated technology, specialized equipment, something that would at least explain how a vault of this caliber had been defeated. What they found instead was the residue of aerosol hairspray on the motion sensor lens. A can of ordinary aerosol hairspray, sprayed directly onto the sensor, was enough to blind it completely. The heat detector had been blocked with a piece of styrofoam. The light detector had been covered with a piece of tape. The magnetic door alarm had been fooled with a simple magnet. 5 layers of cutting-edge security technology, and the men who dismantled every single one of them had done it with items you could buy at any pharmacy or hardware store in Europe for less than 50 euros combined. The vault that was supposed to be impenetrable, the vault that diamond traders from across the world had trusted with their life's work, had been defeated with the contents of a bathroom cabinet. To understand how that was possible, you have to go back years, and you have to start in a city that runs entirely on diamonds. Antwerp is a port city in northern Belgium, and for more than 5 centuries, it has been the diamond capital of the world. Roughly 80% of the world's rough diamonds pass through Antwerp at some point in their journey from the mine to the ring, or the necklace, or the vault. The diamond district sits in a small area near the central train station, covering just a few square blocks, but inside those blocks flows more concentrated wealth than almost anywhere else on Earth. The streets are lined with traders, cutters, polishers, brokers, and dealers. The buildings look completely ordinary from the outside, and that is very much the point. The Antwerp Diamond Center at 9 Hovenierstraat was one of the most secure private vaults in Europe. It held safe deposit boxes rented out to diamond traders, jewelers, and private individuals from across the world. People stored loose stones, finished jewelry, gold, cash, and documents inside those boxes. The vault itself was protected by multiple layers of security. There was a magnetic sensor on the vault door, a seismic sensor designed to detect vibrations from any drilling or cutting, a heat detector, a light detector, and a Doppler radar sensor inside the vault itself that would detect motion, even if someone somehow bypassed everything else. The vault door was 10 centimeters of solid steel held in place by more than 100 bolts. The building had 24-hour video surveillance and a guard on the premises at all times. The people who rented boxes here believed their valuables were untouchable, and for a long time, they had every reason to believe that. Sometime in the late 1990s, a man named Leonardo Notarbartolo began making visits to Antwerp. He was Italian, from Turin, well-dressed and soft-spoken, and he presented himself as a diamond dealer. He rented an apartment in the diamond district, introduced himself to people in the trade, and began building a quiet presence in the community. He opened a safe deposit box at the Antwerp Diamond Center and visited the vault regularly. He paid his rent on time and was polite to the building staff. He was exactly the kind of tenant the building management was happy to have. What no one in Antwerp knew was that Notarbartolo was not a diamond dealer at all. He was a career criminal with a long history of theft across Europe, and he was the front man for a crew that investigators would later refer to as the School of Turin. This was a loose network of professional thieves from the Turin area of Italy who specialized in high-value commercial burglaries. These were not opportunistic criminals grabbing what they could find. These were people who selected their targets carefully, planned their operations over long periods of time, and executed with a level of precision that set them apart from almost anyone else operating in Europe at that time. Nodar Bartolow's specific job was to get inside the building and learn it from the inside out. He was there to understand its daily rhythms, to map its security systems, and to make himself so familiar and unremarkable that nobody would ever think twice about seeing him there. He spent approximately 3 years doing exactly that. During those 3 years, Nodar Bartolow made regular trips to the vault and paid close attention to everything around him. He watched who came and went through the building. He studied the guard rotation and noted when the building was busy and when it fell quiet. He paid attention to the elevator, the stairwells, and the loading entrance at the rear of the building. He visited his deposit box often enough that his presence became completely routine to everyone who worked there. He was just another trader going about his business, and nobody gave him a second look. His crew, meanwhile, was conducting their own research back in Italy and on their own quiet visits to Antwerp. They identified the specific security sensors installed in the vault room and studied exactly how each one functioned. Then they began working out countermeasures for each individual system, which is how they eventually arrived at the hairspray, the styrofoam, the tape, and the magnet. This was not improvised problem-solving done under pressure. This was methodical technical work carried out over a long period, with each solution tested and refined before the crew committed to using it. The plan they eventually settled on was built around one core principle. They would not try to break through the vault door. They would not drill through it or blow it open or attack it in any conventional way. Instead, they would open the vault door the correct way, by dialing in the right combination, and then they would work from the inside. The 10-centimeter steel door and its 100 bolts were completely irrelevant if you could open it cleanly using the actual combination. They had worked out that if you could observe the combination being entered from close enough range, and with enough precision, you could replicate it later. Nodar Bartolow's access gave him proximity to the vault entrance, but watching a combination being dialed from a natural standing distance was not reliable enough to capture the exact sequence. They needed something more precise. Investigators believe Nodar Bartolow or someone connected to the crew installed a concealed camera in the vault corridor, positioned carefully to record the combination wheel being used by authorized staff. The footage gave them the exact numbers they needed. The heist was planned for the weekend of February 15 and 16, 2003, and that weekend was chosen very deliberately. Monday, February 17, was a public holiday in Belgium, which meant the vault would not be opened again until Tuesday morning. That gave the crew roughly 60 hours from the moment they entered the vault to the moment anyone would come looking. 60 hours to work through every box in that room without a single interruption. On the evening of Saturday, February 15, the crew entered the building. Investigators believe they accessed it through the parking garage beneath the structure. They had a copy of the key to the vault corridor, and they had the correct combination for the vault door. They had also brought with them the specific tools and devices they had prepared for defeating each of the security sensors, because getting the door open was only the first part of the problem. The sensors inside the room were still active, and any one of them triggering an alarm would bring the entire operation down instantly. They worked through each sensor in turn. The aerosol hairspray went onto the Doppler radar lens. The styrofoam panel went in front of the heat detector. The tape went over the light sensor. The magnetic plate was attached near the door sensor to mimic the signal the system expected to receive when the door was fully locked, tricking it into registering the door as closed and secure even while it stood wide open. Each countermeasure was applied carefully and in the right sequence, and when they were done, every alarm in that vault was effectively blind. They opened the bags and went to work. The crew moved through the box room in a systematic way, working along the rows of deposit boxes arranged along the walls and in freestanding units across the floor. There were approximately 160 boxes in total. The crew used drills and pry bars to force each one open, pulled out the contents, packed everything into bags, and moved straight to the next box. They were not careful or delicate about it. There was no need to be. They had 60 hours, and a building that believed nothing was happening. What came out of those boxes was staggering. There were loose diamonds, both cut stones and rough stones. There was finished jewelry of enormous value. There were watches, gold in various forms, cash in multiple currencies, and private documents. By the time the crew finished working through the room, they had emptied an estimated 123 of the boxes. The total value of what was taken was never precisely established, partly because many of the box holders refused to fully disclose their losses for insurance or tax reasons. The official estimate placed the figure at over $100 million, and several investigators who worked the case believed the true number was considerably higher than that. The crew worked through Saturday night and deep into Sunday. At some point before the building superintendent arrived that morning, they gathered their bags, walked out of the vault corridor, and left the building. They made no attempt to conceal what had happened or to tidy the scene behind them. The vault door was left standing open. The broken boxes and all the debris were left exactly where they had fallen. They walked out and the city swallowed them whole. When the building superintendent arrived on Sunday morning and found the vault door open, he walked to the entrance, looked inside, and stood very still for a moment. Then he called the police. By Sunday afternoon, detectives and forensic technicians were inside the building trying to understand the full scale of what they were looking at. The scene in the vault was unlike anything the Antwerp police had encountered before. The number of opened boxes, the technical sophistication required to defeat 5 separate sensor systems, the clean entry into the building with no signs of forced access anywhere. None of it matched the profile of any burglary crew they had dealt with previously. Detectives began interviewing the building staff and the box holders, and the box holders immediately created a problem for the investigation. Many of them were unwilling to provide a precise inventory of what they had lost. Some said they could not remember exactly what they had been storing. A handful refused to cooperate with investigators at all. This was not entirely surprising given the nature of the diamond trade, where undeclared assets and cash transactions were common. But it meant that building a complete picture of the theft was going to be very difficult. Investigators pulled all of the building's surveillance footage and went through it carefully. The recordings confirmed that people had been inside the building over the relevant period, but the crew had been deliberate about avoiding clear camera angles, and no usable images of faces could be extracted from the footage. Forensic technicians then went over the vault room itself, working through the debris on the floor and examining the surfaces of the opened boxes and the walls. They found fingerprints, multiple fingerprints in several locations. Whoever had executed this operation with such technical precision had not maintained the same discipline about wearing gloves consistently throughout the entire job. Some of the prints were too partial to be useful, but several were clear enough to run through the international databases. The second major break in the investigation did not come from inside the vault at all. It came from a forest 40 kilometers outside the city. Shortly after the heist was discovered, a local man was walking through woodland near a small town called Flordambos and came across a collection of items scattered among the trees. There was a partially eaten salami sandwich. There were torn envelopes. There were pieces of paper with handwritten notes. There was miscellaneous rubbish, and there were some of the tools that had been used during the break-in. Someone from the crew had driven out to this stretch of forest after leaving the building and dumped their equipment and their waste there, apparently believing the location was remote enough that nobody would find it. The man gathered everything he could find and brought it to the police, and it turned out to be one of the most consequential mistakes the thieves made across the entire operation. Investigators went over every item recovered from the forest with forensic care. The torn envelopes were pieces of correspondence that had been stored inside the deposit boxes, and they could be matched to specific box holders, which helped investigators begin confirming exactly which boxes had been targeted. The handwritten notes on the scraps of paper contained details about the operation that helped the investigation understand how the crew had organized and prepared the job. And on the partially eaten salami sandwich, forensic technicians recovered a DNA sample from whoever had been eating it during or after the heist. The DNA was run through the available databases but came back without a match. The sample was carefully preserved and kept on file for future comparison. Then the fingerprints recovered from inside the vault room were run through international databases, and one of them returned a clear and definitive match. The print belonged to Leonardo Bartolo, the same man who had been renting a safe deposit box in the vault for 3 years, the same man who had been riding that elevator and walking those corridors and greeting the building staff by name since the late 1990s. Antwerp police contacted Italian authorities the same day the match came back. Italian investigators already had a substantial file on Bartolo. They knew his criminal background, and they knew his connections to the theft networks operating out of Turin. Working alongside the Belgian team, they now began building a full case around him and working to identify every other member of the crew. Bartolo was arrested in Trana, a small town near Turin, in March 2003, approximately 3 weeks after the heist. When police brought him in, he denied everything. He pointed out correctly that his fingerprints being present in the vault corridor proved nothing on its own, since he was a registered box holder with every legitimate reason to have been in that area of the building over the previous 3 years. He denied any involvement in the robbery and offered investigators nothing that moved the case forward. The investigation continued regardless. Over the following months, Italian and Belgian investigators identified 4 other men they believed had been part of the crew. These were Pietro Tavano, Ferdinando Finato, Elio Donorio, and a 5th individual that police referred to as the Monster, whose identity was known to investigators but who remained at large considerably longer than the others. Each man had a criminal history and could be connected to the Turin network through phone records, travel documents, surveillance work, and information developed through sources within the criminal community. The trial opened in Antwerp in 2005. The evidence against Bartolo and the other defendants was substantial, but carried gaps that the prosecution could not completely close. The DNA recovered from the sandwich in the forest was not matched to any of the men who stood trial. The precise method by which the crew had obtained the vault combination was never definitively established in court, though investigators had developed a clear and detailed theory about the concealed camera. These were gaps the defense used where they could, but they were not enough to overcome the weight of the evidence as a whole. Bartolo was convicted and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Tavano received 5 years. Finato and Donorio also received custodial sentences. The trials produced convictions, but they did not produce a complete account of the crime from any of the participants, and they did not produce the outcome that the victims of the theft had been waiting for most urgently. The diamonds were never found. Not a single stone taken from the Antwerp vault that weekend has ever been definitively identified and returned to its owner. In 2009, while still serving his sentence, Bartolo gave a lengthy interview to Wired magazine. He admitted his involvement in the heist, but offered an account of the job that was sharply different from the picture investigators had built. He claimed that he had been hired by a diamond merchant already operating inside the Antwerp trade, and that this insider had orchestrated the robbery specifically to steal certain items from certain boxes, items connected to fraudulent insurance schemes that were already running within the diamond industry. He claimed the robbery was not simply an outside crew targeting a vault, but a sophisticated fraud operation designed and directed partly from within the trade itself. Investigators publicly dismissed most of what Bartolo said in that interview as the self-serving account of a convicted man trying to muddy the water around his own guilt. But the story attracted serious attention because it pointed directly at something that had genuinely troubled the investigation from the very beginning. The crew had known too much. They had known the specific vault combination. They had known the precise details of every sensor system in that room. They had operated inside the building for 3 years without raising any suspicion from anyone at any point. Either they were extraordinarily skilled at every level of intelligence gathering, or somewhere along the way they had received help from someone who already had detailed knowledge of what was inside that vault and exactly how it was protected. That question was never answered to anyone's satisfaction, and it has never been answered since. The Antwerp diamond heist remains, more than 2 decades later, the largest diamond robbery in recorded history. The complete composition of the crew has never been publicly confirmed. The diamonds have never surfaced in any identifiable form in any market anywhere in the world. The insider question has never been resolved. The box holders whose valuables disappeared over that February weekend have never been compensated in full, and a significant number of them never disclosed the true extent of what they had lost, even to the police investigating their own theft. Somewhere in the world right now, more than $100 million worth of diamonds exist. They may have been recut into entirely different shapes to make them unrecognizable to anyone who might have known them before. They may have been sold through markets where no questions are ever asked and no records are ever kept. They may be sitting inside another vault somewhere, completely unremarkable among other stones, with nothing visible connecting them to a building in Antwerp or a weekend in February 2003. In a trade where so much has always moved through handshakes and trust and transactions that leave no paper trail, $100 million worth of diamonds can disappear completely and leave almost nothing behind to follow. The vault at 9 Hovenierstraat has new security systems now. The door has been replaced and upgraded. The building still operates, and traders still bring their stones there, still trust that everything will be where they left it when they come back. And the man who spent 3 years walking those corridors, learning every sensor and every schedule and every face, making himself so familiar that nobody ever thought to look at him twice, served his sentence and was released back into the world. Nobody has ever said where the diamonds went.